Hi, everyone. This is John Daly. I'm here with Bernie Goldberg for episode 2 of the No BS Zone. How are you doing today, Bernie?
Just fine, just fine.
Good, good. So we received a lot of great feedback after our first episode, and we're sort of working on incorporating some of it. And one of the questions was, who is this John Daly guy exactly? I suppose I should have introduced myself. Everybody knows who you are, but kind of fair that people want to know who I am. So just to let everybody know, I'm a longtime writing contributor to Bernie's website. I've written for lots of other publications over the years as well, including National Review and Pace Magazine. I'm also a published author of 5 novels, sort of the thriller genre, which you can learn about on my website if anybody's interested, johndalybooks.com. But that's enough about me. You're all here for Bernie. So today's topic is about today's topic of it. And if you hear a little noise in the background, I got some construction work going on behind me, so hopefully it's not too distracting. But today's topic is about the media and media bias, specifically how the landscape has changed since Bernie wrote the book Bias, which came out over 20 years ago. It was a huge bestseller, of course. It was a defining book, and it was deemed very controversial. It upset a lot of Bernie's colleagues. Have they forgiven you for that, Bernie, by the way?
No, basically no. I mean, I say no jokingly because those who didn't like what I did stop talking to me then and haven't started over the next 20 years. So
right, but you made a lot of new friends out of it. Did you make some good new friends from the book, I assume, right?
I did, and that's a very important point and a very important thing for me. I reached out to people who didn't know me from a hole in the wall, and I think the reason the book was so successful along the lines that you're asking is because I caught up with a big swath of the American people. I caught up with what they were already thinking about the media, and that's why I think the book was as successful as it was.
Good. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I think you, in a way, that sort of you kind of let people know that they weren't exactly crazy from their observations that they've seen in the media over the years, and I think it was a good thing, as an insider to kind of give the real behind the scenes story. When I think previously there was a lot of it was based on speculation as to the motivations and whatnot. I mean, everybody, I think a lot of people on the right saw it, as you mentioned, you sort of caught up in that respect. But it was good to sort of have some a really good case for it to kind of show what exactly goes on behind the scenes. So
well, remember, I was an insider. I
right.
had worked at CBS News as a correspondent for 28 years, and I wasn't just writing my opinions about bias. I saw how bias actually came about, which, John, is quite different from how it comes about currently.
Right. Right. No, absolutely, absolutely. So one of the points you made in Bias was that the media bias had come about honestly, in that there were no conspiracies. It was largely a product of groupthink among like-minded individuals, sort of living in a bubble. Do you believe that is still true 20 years later?
No, I don't. When I wrote Bias, and when I started thinking about bias in the news and noticing bias, what I said back then and what I'll repeat now is that Dan Rather never ever came in the morning, summoned his top lieutenants, pulled the shades and doused the lights, gave the secret handshake and the secret salute, and said, how are we going to get those Republicans today? How are we going to screw those conservatives today? It never happened that way. Conservatives may have thought it happened that way, but it didn't. Bias came about as a result of groupthink. If you put too many like-minded people in a room, and in this case, it was too many like-minded liberal people in a newsroom, you were going to wind up with a liberal slant on the news or a liberal bias on the news. That's how it was when I wrote Bias, and that's how it was for quite some time. Today, it's different. Today, it's moved from bias to corruption as far as I'm concerned. Let me speak mainly about cable news. They do come in the morning and get together and say, if you're on the left, how are we going to get those Republicans today? By magnifying and running as many stories as we can. For instance, that make Donald Trump look bad if you're CNN, or if you're Fox, how many times can we say that Joe Biden is senile or not in control of his faculties, or is a total doofus who doesn't belong in the White House? So they do come in the morning and tailor their biases in a certain direction, liberal or conservative. And they do it for one simple reason. It's the business model. The business model in cable news is make sure you give the audience what it wants. Make sure you feed into their own value system, their own biases. Don't make them think. God forbid you make them think. If you don't give them enough conservative stuff on Fox, they may go to Newsmax or someplace. If you don't give them enough liberal stuff on CNN, they may and have in fact gone to MSNBC. So the difference is back then, 20 years ago, it just happened because there were too many like-minded liberals who saw the world a certain way. They didn't think they were liberal, they thought they were reasonable. Today, the business model dictates that you give the audience what it wants. If it's a conservative audience, you give them, you tell them what they already know. You feed into their own biases. If it's a liberal audience, you do the same in that direction.
Right, right. No, I think it's a very good point. Now, just to sort of maybe play a little bit of devil's advocate here, one of the points you made in bias is that as before, this is before I think Fox was in its pretty early days when your book came out. But you made the point that so many of your colleagues were lean left. I think you actually used the percentage 98% of your media colleagues. I don't know if that might have been an exaggeration, but a lot, And in recent years, I have seen more conservative and even Trump-friendly individuals appearing as analysts on traditionally liberal news networks. Do you think they're making a step in the right direction, specifically within the mainstream media, or do you think they, have really still a long way to go to sort of balance out their product? Or, like you said, it doesn't seem like they're even trying in some cases.
Well, there's a difference between cable and the old networks. And by the way, when I said 98% or thereabouts, the few who were conservative didn't talk about it, because
Right.
in an American newsroom, you can be that far to the left and nobody notices it. If you're that far to the right, you stick out like a sore thumb. So let me get that on the record. So the 98% versus the 2% weren't talking a lot about that they voted for George Bush, for instance. I think the networks, ABC, CBS, and NBC, are far more reasonable. I mean, they actually look like a model of objectivity compared to what cable is. So if they brought in conservative commentators, and at CBS they brought in Mick Mulvaney, who was Donald Trump's chief of staff for a while, and they did that, they've acknowledged, because they think Republicans are going to take over Congress in November, and they need access. They need people who can help them get Republicans on CBS. So I think there's more of a tendency to be down the middle there. On cable, when they bring in, if Fox brings in a liberal, it's part of the entertainment. They'll have 4 conservatives and a liberal, and at CNN they'll have 27 liberals and a conservative. I think there's a difference between ABC, NBC, and CBS, and CNN, MSNBC, and Fox.
Right. No, you bring up a good point about the the one liberal and the four conservatives. That's sort of that's sort of the model behind the five, and that's one of Fox News's most popular shows. And it's funny because I do sort of it's to me it's sort of the inverse of the View in many ways, where you have the one conservative getting beat up by the others at the table. But yeah, no, it's a formula that's attractive for sure.
They must have figured out someplace along the line. Somebody must have actually looked into this and analyzed it and said 4-1 is the perfect combination.
Right.
3-2 is not good because it's too close to 50-50. 5-1 looks like you're beating up on the one. 4-1 is just right.
I guess so. I mean, they're doing very well with it for sure. So.
But at CNN, I'm exaggerating only a bit to make a point.
Right.
I've seen like 117 liberals on a panel. The panel goes, from New York to Boise, Idaho, practically, and then there's one conservative on the panel.
Yeah, no, they got a few, but yeah, they're very still underrepresented. I think Mary Catherine Ham is one that sticks out. S.E. Cupp, though she seems to have gone more, liberal over time, but there's definitely, they're very far outnumbered. I'm seeing that.
Let me make a comment on that.
Mm-hmm.
Both sides like nothing more than someone who used to be a liberal, who's now bashing liberals, or who used to be a conservative and is bashing conservatives. So Fox will have people on who were Democrats, but they can't stand the Democratic Party anymore. And CNN will have on, and MSNBC is even worse. They'll have on a bunch of people who they describe as Republican strategists. They haven't been Republicans since the Lincoln administration.
Right.
But they're Republican strategists because it looks better when a Republican is bashing Republicans than when one more progressive is bashing Republicans. It's all entertainment. I give them credit for one thing and only one thing: their entertainment values. They figured out how to make it watchable.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's an interesting point, and I think it's much more pronounced now. But I think even probably some of your early appeal on Fox News was that you were a self-described traditional, like old school liberal who had written this book, and I think that definitely made me pay more attention, because I could have turned on O'Reilly, and I always knew where he stood, but it was interesting to hear it from somebody with that different background. And I think for a long time, Dick Morris was very popular for the same reason. He was a Clinton pollster, and I don't put him in the same category as you, of course, Dick Morris, but I think that there's something. I think there's part of that is people sort of want to. I think part of that is people want to hear that other perspective, but then I think there's an extreme with some others where, you look at a lot of the conservative commentators on these other networks, and a lot of them are reliably, very anti-Trump and whatnot. And I'm not a Trump guy either. That's who I am. And but yeah, they definitely select a certain type of conservative, as a spokesperson on some of these networks. Sure.
What Fox apparently didn't understand is that when I said I was against bias, and conservatives loved me, I think I could have been elected something or other at the height of my popularity after bias. What Fox didn't understand is when I said I was against bias, whether it was coming from the left or from the right. When I was criticizing bias from the left, there were no problems. When I was criticizing from the right, people got very uncomfortable.
Oh, absolutely. And it's some people, I don't think many people know this. So I have access to your Facebook page, and I put out your columns, when they come, because you're not on Facebook. And I used to have notifications set up on my email when you'd go somebody would comment on something, or somebody would send a message or whatever, and you would go on the O'Reilly Factor. And the moment, this was back in 2015, 2016, you would say anything negative about Trump, I would just get these ding, 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 all this negative feedback, and people just, as soon as they saw that, they suddenly, a lot of people thought you had sort of switched sides, but no, you've always been willing to call out both sides, and it upsets the other side, predictably.
And that's why I say that not every person who watches cable news, not every single one, but many of the people who watch cable news aren't going there to learn something. They're going there to get their own views, the ones they already hold, validated. So if you're a conservative, as I am, I'm supposed to say certain things. Well, when I went outside, when I colored outside the lines, it got very uncomfortable, both for Fox management, not for Bill O'Reilly, by the way. He was okay with it.
Right.
But with some of the producers on the other shows that I was on, because they would see the same thing you were seeing from the audience. And I suspect they were saying, this guy is going to lose us some viewers.
Right.
They're angry that he said what he said about, let's say, Donald Trump. And as a result, they don't want somebody who's going to be conservative but objective at the same time, if you know what I mean. In other words, I could have conservative values. I could link conservative most of the time, but I'm not an ideologue. If I think conservatives have done something wrong and I'm asked a question about it, I'll answer the question honestly. And I think, again, not everybody, but a lot of the people who watch cable news aren't looking for that. They're
Right.
looking for conservative, reliably conservative points of view from conservatives. And at CNN and MSNBC, they're looking for reliable left of center points of views from liberals. It just unsettles people when you don't play to type. And I didn't, and I don't play to type. This is what I've told the people listening to us in the past, and I'll say it again. All you get from me on my website is my honest opinions. They're opinions. I won't pander ever to the viewer because I have more respect for the viewer. At cable TV, that's all they do is pander to the audience. I won't do that. I'll tell you what I honestly think, and you can tell me if you think I'm right. I hope you do, or you can tell me if you think I'm wrong and why I'm wrong.
Right.
To use the current jargon, that's how I roll.
Very, very hip, for sure. So,
Hip.
Go ahead.
No, good. No, very hip. I like that.
Exactly. So I will ask another question, kind of going back to bias, and maybe this will be the last one. If one of the chapters in Bias is how Bill Clinton cured homelessness, and it highlighted how the media was sort of obsessed with stories of the homeless under Reagan and the first Bush, but suddenly stopped drawing attention to the issue once Clinton took office. Have you seen that type of thing? We're not that far into Biden's presidency, but I mean, it's enough where, have you seen that sort of thing where a certain issue has suddenly become uninteresting or, to the mainstream media now that Joe Biden has taken office?
Well, if I think long and hard, I probably could come up with one or two, but more to the point, Joe Biden's failures are so in your face that even his fans in the media can't ignore them. Inflation. If they thought about downplaying that, they would squander what little credibility they still have. The mess on the border. That's nobody, even Democrats, don't want uncontrolled immigration into the United States. Crime. You think Democrats are okay with crime? Now, liberal news organizations, because they're fans of Democratic candidates, may play down. They'll play up the fact that Joe Biden is talking about guns, but play down the fact that it's Democratic district attorneys who are not prosecuting criminals. And it was Democratic legislatures that passed no cash bail laws that are resulting in that crime. But my point is, that the things that are plaguing America and Biden's administration are so blatant that his fans in the media, if they ignore it, as I say, would squander what little credibility they still have. And they're not gonna go over the side of the mountain for Joe Biden or anybody else. They would prefer to support Joe Biden while they're bashing Republicans. But when it's as bad as it is right now, they can't ignore his problems. Because if they did, it would become the media's problems too. And they're not going to let that happen.
I would say one area that I think would be different if Trump had won a second term. So I do think what we saw happen in Afghanistan would have also gone down under Trump. He was working toward the same goal. But I do think if he were still president, I do think we'd be hearing still a lot more about Afghanistan than we do now. It's sort of I think disappeared from the news cycles altogether. What do you think about that?
It's disappeared because Biden is president, you mean?
Yeah, that's what I think. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think a couple of things. I think they couldn't ignore what happened in Afghanistan because 13 American soldiers were killed. They couldn't ignore that. But we don't hear a lot about the Americans who are still in Afghanistan who may want to get out. But I do think this, and this is just conjecture, but I think it's educated conjecture. If Donald Trump had been reelected and it went down the way it did, just as a humiliating mess, the final days, I don't think Fox would have been all over it. CNN and MSNBC would have done it 24/7. But Fox would have found a reason, the opinion people at Fox would have found a reason to say it was they would have said what Joe Biden said about what happened, that it was inevitable, that we did the best we could, that it couldn't have happened any differently. It was inevitable. And I think that's what would have happened from conservative media if it happened under Donald Trump, which only goes to my central point. When it comes to opinion journalism, even opinion journalists have to be fair. And by and large, they're not. They're ideologues. They just spout what their audience wants to hear.
Right. No, I couldn't agree more. So I guess we should probably go ahead and leave it at that. I want to thank you, Bernie, for doing this again. I hope people enjoy this, and please let us know if you're watching this and you have any suggestions or other feedback. Let us know in the comment section below. This particular episode will be available exclusively. We gave the first one away for free just to kind of get people interested and let them know what this was about. But this one is for exclusive members only. And if you enjoy these video episodes, please tell your friends and have them sign up. Thanks again, Bernie. Anything else you'd like to say in closing?
Just thank you, John. I enjoyed this chat and these chats because it's one of the few places where you can have a discussion without the clock ticking in your head and speaking in sound bites, 20-second sound bites. So I enjoyed it very much. And thank you all for watching. And as John said, let us hear what you think.
Very good. Very good. Thanks, everyone. And have a great day, Bernie.
You too.